Welcome to the ADAverse, the Australian business community podcast for all things automation, data and AI.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the ADAverse podcast, your hub for all things automation, data, and AI. In today's episode, we're stepping into the data doctor's office with Gladwin Mendez. He's the Fractional Chief Data and AI Officer at GEC Prudentia, and he's going to run a full health check on organizations' data. So what we're going to do today, we're going to explore how to move from reacting to data fires towards building real data fitness using Gladwin's three-stage methodology and model of maturity assessment, strategic planning, and then finally execution. So whether you're a business leader unsure where to start or a data professional looking to drive more meaningful change, this episode delivers the insights you need to go from diagnosis to transformation. So grab your clipboard, sharpen your insights, and let's get ready for your data health check right here in the ADAverse podcast. Gladwin, welcome to the ADAverse podcast, and it's great to have you on the show today.
Great to be on, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
All right, before we dive into the diagnosis, tell us a little bit about your background, what you do at GEC Prudentia, and how your journey led you to focus on data health.
So look, as you've already touched upon, Shaun, I'm a Fractional Chief Data and AI Officer, and I help organizations essentially cure their biggest data ailments and get them set up to win the data and AI marathon. That's it in a nutshell, right? And what we do as a fractional executive is really about capability uplift for organizations, where my business partner and I really are focused on teaching you how to fish rather than selling you a fish. And so my background and how I sort of got here was 20 years living and breathing data, working across most industries, but specializing in financial services, insurance, utilities, logistics, retail, higher education, and so on. The key thing out of that is the empowering of organizations to unlock strategic value from data, and that's what all organizations are looking for at the end of the day. And really doing all of that while navigating and balancing the regulatory and ethical landscape and the challenges that people are facing into with AI now. I also happen to be an active member on the Forbes Technology Council, a number of sort of AI not-for-profit organizations where my advisory work help actively influence a global community of senior technology business leaders. Now, The interesting thing is over sort of a decade of working in insights and professional services, I've seen a lot of companies' actual data, like companies that are on the ASX, NZX, Standard, S&P. But it was only when I went into industry, so sort of 10 plus years in sort of professional services, but when I went into industry, I found that most organizations do things harder, not smarter. And they're always going, but hey, look, we've always done it that way. And that really drove me from getting the insights, view into data, into data governance and data strategy. And how do you really get to working smarter at the end of the day? And that drove my passion for what I call data enablement and the fine art of strategy. Now, next part of that journey really was I became a chartered board director, because at the end of the day, that's where the strategy for an organization is set for the organization, where it manages the risks, and the buck stops with the board. Because at the end of the day, if you think of it, Shaun, what do the board look at day in and day out? They're looking at dashboards, numbers, and insights to make decisions on. So yeah, I find that combination of board level thinking, combining data and technology critical.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think we're going to have a great conversation today, right? So let's start off with the why. So why is data strategy still such a mess for so many companies in 2025?
Yeah, but that's the million or $1 trillion question there, right, Shaun? And I think here's a really interesting opening statement, that only 7% of boards have a technology background, like have someone with a technology background on their board of directors. There's also a lot of hype in the market, which is making things challenging. I've had board directors come to me and go, hey, Gladwin, we'll take 3 AI. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, right? So there's lots of uplift required in this space. And look, the board, like I've already touched upon, set the strategy, and that understanding needs to be there at the end of the day. Organizations are being told that AI is a panacea at the end of the day, but all these organizations have generally underinvested in their data. But also at the same time, they have no idea where to start. They're going, look, we're being told we'll go bust if we don't implement AI, or we're not a data-driven organization. But they go, we don't know where to start, right? They don't have those foundations in place and the core in place, and they don't have that muscle to innovate. So where do you start with getting healthy at the end of the day when everything looks like a mess? And it's interesting, a recent KPMG study came out on AI where they were saying only 59% of Australian businesses have an AI strategy, and only 56% have policies and practices to govern responsible use. So there's some horrifying numbers. With all this noise that you're going to get left behind, but like I touched upon, people and boards and executives have no idea where to start. That's why the data and AI strategy is key. If you think of it, and we go with our analogy of like health check, data is the lifeblood of an organization. Without good data in this day and age, it would be horribly morbid. The patient unfortunately dies.
I love all the analogies that you use. And speaking about that as analogies, so why did you decide to choose a health and wellness metaphor? And why do you think it resonates so well with business leaders?
Well, it's non-technical. See, that's another interesting thing is if you're talking to the board, you're talking to executives, chief marketing officer potentially, or actually CFO, non-technical executives or businesses, you have to use the right analogy or the right story, I find. And we've all been to the doctor once in our lives, haven't we? So, it's something that most people know and understand. And now as senior leaders too, we also have to prioritize our health as we get older. So to be honest, often the work that I do is a real wake-up call for boards and executives to hear, hey guys, actually you're not doing that great. When we show our executives in our benchmark executive summaries how healthy they are compared to other organizations in their industry or cross industry, it's the equivalent of being told, hey, look, you might be 40 years old, but you have the body of a 70-year-old. And that can be a significant wake-up call. And often, most organizations I go in, and to that KPMG study around maturity, we're going in and finding the maturity of organizations across the enterprise is a lot lower than the boards or the executives think they are.
Yeah. Now, I love kind of the different stages that you use. So let's dive into the first stage, which is the maturity assessments. And you often refer to that as your data blood test. So talk to us a little bit about what a data blood test looks like in real terms.
Yes, so in real terms, for most organizations have found it. We have built up a 140 questions sort of checklist across 5 key pillars, I would call it. Strategy, people, process, technology, and data. And what we generally do is we go through with a cross-section of the business, doing interviews and facilitated interviews, and come up with a 0 to a 5 rating. Everything from, hey, look, we don't know what you're talking about in relation to this point, or look, we always do this. We always check data before doing X, Y, and Z. And getting that cross-section across the business, going through that robust questionnaire across those 5 key pillars, gets a pretty good blood test check, and it checks across key things that you're looking for the health check of an organization.
Yeah, gotcha. And I guess after you've done this 140 question deep dive, like what types of patterns or warning signs usually emerge from that assessment?
Now, see, the interesting thing is, if you see 5 out of the 5 areas we look at, 3 are actually non-technical. It's the strategy, people, and process. So it doesn't surprise me anymore, having done this, over a dozen times now, that the recurring patterns or warning signs that come from the assessments is the change management, culture, and education working hand in hand. And I'm finding I keep getting requests every week almost that I've been requested by several large global organizations to run data and AI training sessions for their executive and middle management because they're going, look, we're not delivering on the promise of AI or our data. We're not data driven. We need that change management, that education and comms and communication is critical to uplift our culture. And if we're getting it right at the top, then we can trickle it down through the business. But those generally, without fail, come up as the top three.
Yeah, very, very interesting, right? And are there any other surprising kind of blind spots that even more mature organizations often miss?
Look, I think, well, I know that the interesting and back to board members and, the key decision makers for an organization is I think most people and board members would be horrified at the quality of the data that they're relying on to make decisions on. And the data quality or lack thereof, or the manual processes to pull it together or mash the results to get this nice clean dashboard at the end of the day. I'll use an example of I did a data strategy for a logistics company once, and thankfully very on board with, hey, look, we need to take this seriously. And I met with the CEOs of each division. So we had the logistics, like the transport division, we had actually had multiple transport divisions and different brands and labels. They had the warehousing division. And the interesting thing, sitting down with each one of the CEOs and going through that checklist with them, getting their views of what their challenges and what the opportunities were in data. One of the key questions or metrics that I queried them on was, hey, look, how confident are you on some of these key metrics? DIFOT, which is delivered in full and on time, for example. You've got two other counterparts of these two other divisions. How do you define it? And you should have seen the CEO's face going, oh, yeah, I will leave that to someone else. I said, you do realize you're rolling up DIFOT as a key metric from three divisions up to the board, but you haven't checked that the definition is consistent and the same. So you're not comparing apples with apples. I kid you not, the three CEOs who I then queried went running back, and the first question they asked was, how are we defining that? To go fix it. The first thing they did, well, actually, one CEO literally said, look, Gladwin, can you please stop? I'm going to query my IT team and get a clear definition because I'm not quite sure, and I'm querying the other CEOs. Because that was like that assumption, right, of key KPIs and understanding certainly was a big surprise, but doesn't surprise me anymore.
Yeah, that's it. And I can imagine after you kind of get some of these findings and you need to present that to a leadership team, I mean, many people could be quite defensive or could be overwhelmed. So what strategies do you use to present that to them in a way that they can digest and obviously move forward with?
Look, that's an interesting thought and one that has to be considered, of course, right? It has to be a balanced approach, and it's how you deliver the message. And often my executive summaries, when I'm delivering, that's 2 pages and it's balanced. And people forget, okay, they go through that kind of denial and acceptance phase. Honestly, you can see it with these executives. So as long as you've got a balanced approach and you go, okay, you're starting from a low base, but guess what? We can together accelerate up these maturity level actually quite easily. It's that 80-20 rule. You can accelerate quite quickly from, say, a 0 or like a 1 to a 2 or 3. But also consider that once you get to 4, for example, you spend 80% of your effort getting to that last mile at the end of the day. So it's going, hey, look, balancing things out. I know this doesn't look great. There's some denial, but we've got to have some acceptance here. It's using a robust approach. It's a benchmark to these other industries and the experience that comes behind it. But where there's this sort of challenge, there's massive opportunity to turn the dial up and increase your maturity very quickly. And often some of the biggest opportunities are quite simple and just needed someone to come in and go, hey, look, actually, consider doing X, Y, and Z. Like I remember a large global insurer that I did some work with, we're able to deliver $2 million in savings in 6 months elapsed. So recurring savings annually, by just increasing their maturity a little bit making approaches cohesive across the various teams from the interviews that we've done and getting some good, solid foundations in place.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty amazing, right? Okay, great. So I guess stage one is all about this maturity assessment, and it's kind of like your data blood test. And then stage two, you move more onto the strategy or roadmap, which you often refer to as your organizational diet plan. So if we follow that analogy, once you've done the diagnosis, how do you help companies cut the fatty foods, so to speak?
Yeah, exactly. The analogy is perfect. The first stage is very much going, done blood tests across all these various areas. You're getting slightly diabetic, your weight's over your BMI. The second part is just like a doctor does, come up with a roadmap and your strategy of this is what you need to do. We've asked all the questions. Do you drink quite a bit? The usual. Do you smoke? How many drinks do you have a week? And it's then going, hey, look, this is what you need to do. We talked about some pragmatic things. This is the roadmap of what needs to be done over this period, and you set the period. Is it over the next year, and then 2 years and 3 year time frame to deliver this in a non-threatening way and capturing those themes so that's pretty cut and dried at the end of the day. And the second one, usually in real life, that involves running workshops with the key people involved in the interviews, the exec leadership team, senior leadership team, to agree on the roadmap collectively, going, hey, look, actually, this is the first, because that's what normally happens. You have the chief marketing officer going, hey, look, actually, I disagree with this. We need to get this done. So it's going, okay, what's the mutually agreed approach? We're first going to cut down your fatty foods. Then maybe this week we'll get you walking. And next week we'll get you maybe running and then walking a little bit. And this is the priority that we're going to follow because we're looking at the full enterprise, the full picture of the person at the end of the day.
Yeah, gotcha. And like if we put that into practical terms, what does a lean, value-focused data strategy actually look like?
So I touched upon it a little bit. So often the first stage is the maturity assessment, and that's usually, and those interviews that I do gives the executive summary. So it's short and sharp. First of all, 2-page executive summary, no more than 10 pages of the roadmap and the recommendations, which are aligned to the overall organizational strategy, because that's critical too. It's like otherwise you're doing it for the sake of doing something or fun whiz bang sort of things. It's we're doing this because we're making the patient run faster. We're doing this because we're going to reduce their weight. We're going to help them make more revenue, cut down costs, etc., make them more efficient. So it's got to be a 2-page executive summary, non-technical, that goes to the executive and to the board, 10 pages for the strategy, and then to the point around teaching a person how to fish. Often I find that it's the appendices that's probably 40 pages long, giving detailed options on how to do this and deliver this, and not just one approach, multiple approaches from our sort of 40 years of experience, my business partner and I, and going, this doesn't work, try this, for the different models at the end of the day to help set it up for success at the end of the day. And also at the same time is because we use a data-driven approach, Shaun, so you can literally follow from the beginning with the maturity assessment, from the feedback, from the workshops, you can literally see why decisions were made. So should priorities change, and look, in this space right now, technology is changing so quickly, even I struggle to keep up with it, that should things change, more realistically, should the budget change, you can adjust the timeframes of these initiatives, and it's fully data-driven at the end of the day, and everyone can see why decisions were made at that, and they go, okay, I can see, well, again, in a non-technical way, I can see because I'm getting a bit overweight, I'm going to become a little bit more diabetic, or I'm at risk of diabetes. Okay, this is what I need to do. So it's clear, this is why you're doing it, how and what you're going to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, beautiful. And I love that data-driven approach to help clients avoid getting distracted by the next shiny thing. And that'll make sure that they focus on kind of real-world business outcomes. So if we change gears slightly, like how do you balance governance with agility in this data strategy?
Now, this is the interesting one, because if you go full governance, you'll grind the business to a halt. You go full innovation, you'll soon spend huge amounts of money and go, but our data quality is crap. So garbage in, garbage out. And we've spent all this money, we're nowhere close. So to use an analogy, how do you run? Imagine your left foot's foundational governance or data enablement. Your right foot is innovation. So you do, and that's the key part of this roadmap, is do enough governance and foundational work, left foot, then right foot, left foot. So foundation, innovation, and from being able to walk half a kilometer, then you're able to walk 2 kilometers, then you're able to run a kilometer. It's all building up that muscle memory and that fitness to be able to deliver it without being completely hamstrung and trying to hop one leg down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gotcha. Again, love that analogy there as well. So obviously once you've done this, there's obviously a lot of initiatives that might come out of it. How do you prioritize those initiatives after that assessment is actually complete?
So as I touched upon, the workshop's one of the key part. It is taking the senior leadership team, the ELT and the board along the journey and using those workshops to get the mutual acceptance of priorities. So again, because it's fully data-driven, those initiatives are laid out. Mind you, there is some slight override or extra weighting that I would put in from my detailed experience in this space. But generally, it's getting I would use the word collective excellence. And it's almost like getting your whole family on board to support you going, hey, look, we will change X, Y, and Z. And maybe instead of, driving down to the supermarket, we'll walk down to the corner store to build up that muscle memory, that fitness and so on. So those workshops literally have, the very stakeholders, they prioritize, hey, look, actually, this is what I feel. We've got 40 initiatives potentially. We all will go in and prioritize the initiatives. And we will also look at t-shirt sizing. It's a two-pronged approach. It's like, hey, look, first of all, we think this is a priority. And then this is what we think how big it is. And based on that, again, fully data-driven, a calculations run over that to go based on, it's high priority. So you can imagine high priority, low effort, immediately that gets prioritized above everything else. And then allows you to go, let's get this low-hanging fruit big wins, and then some of the innovation and so on, and then governance and building that out. So it's the collective excellence, working together, getting everyone on the journey, understanding, hey, I fully understand why this needs to come first. And having the healthy discussion during the workshops going, I don't quite understand that. And it was crazy, actually, time and time again through those workshops, seeing executives going, holy smokes, I never understood it was that big of a problem. I just used to complain, why does it take so long? But now I understand why it's such a challenging thing. It's like, oh, well, actually, I get really, really tired running because I don't run normally. Okay, great. Well, we'll just help you along and maybe we'll run alongside you. So then you're getting everyone on board, you're getting the collective excellence and everyone working towards a common guiding North Star at the end of the day.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, brilliant. So in summary, I guess stage 1 was all about the maturity assessment, and that's the data blood test. Stage 2, we then moved on to strategy and roadmap, which was like the company's diet plan. And then stage 3 is execution, which we often refer to as your data personal trainer. So first up in the execution phase, how important is it to bridge strategy to execution? And why do so many companies fail in this area?
Look, it's critical, Shaun. Last thing you want is a data strategy that gets paid for and built and then gets put in a cupboard somewhere, right? You've sunk this cost already. So the sooner you deliver it and more quickly you deliver it, the sooner you'll get outcomes. The reason why I see it time and time again potentially slow down is because change is scary. And I touched upon why change management is key. Change is scary. Failure is scary, which is why, step 2, I don't give you just one way of how you get match fit. I provide multiple approaches from that experience. And if you have the change capability You're setting up the culture, and that's why tone at the top is critical. And you create a culture where people can try and fail successfully, safely. You'll find better outcomes. And so often culture is a big part. And I'm talking about organizational culture, not just data culture, with pieces of work that I do for organizations.
Yeah, gotcha. And I guess when you start to see this transformation come to light, like give us some examples of when transformation and the execution is done right, where do you start to see the most transformation in companies?
So funny, back to the previous point, it fails because of culture, but where you see it change is certainly in the culture space. And I'll use, to quote Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Mm.
And again, it's why I have three of the pillars being strategy, people, and process to deliver on that trifecta. When you create that right culture for data, security, privacy, ethics, and AI, you'll find your team members are more willing to do the right thing. They're more willing to learn. They're more willing to have the growth mindset and put the hand up to try new things and fail. But because, like I said, fail safely. But also what you're finding is this amazing approach. You're like, this didn't work. Let's try something else. You move from we've always done it this way to let's try something differently. And then you get innovation coming through. You get people being rewarded for trying new things and innovating, and you get that pace. It's literally that you build up that muscle. That muscle gets built up, and it's the 10 reps 5 times. But see, the key thing is there's no silver bullet, and it has to come from the top. So the education, that culture needs to come from the board and the executive, living it and showing it. So that's why, again, 7% of board directors have a technology background. The AI and data education needs to start from the top, needs to be shown from the top, and then everyone else will come through and trickle through to the business.
Yeah, brilliant. And tell me about, because obviously when we bring this to life and we work on the execution, how can delivery partners act as that personal trainer for these data initiatives?
Look, it's a critical part of the I'd say the life cycle of delivery. And the key thing to keep in mind here is because I take an agnostic approach, tool independent, it's the specific initiatives that I can't be an expert in everything I do. I can't be an expert in sort of strategy and change management and so on, all the way down to coding, intelligent automation, or AI agents. So that's where, I think of delivery partners as almost that protein powder to ensure that you're getting the right intake, the right things to be ingesting to accelerate your performance, your recovery at the end of the day. Heck, it almost goes far as saying it's like a legal performance enhancing drug, getting the right partners to accelerate and get the best out of your organization.
And what's your take on kind of companies building this as internal capability or partnering with external organizations that specialize in these fields?
So my view on that is you've got to have, there's no one approach fits all. You generally have to have a mix of the two. It's like going to the doctor and being told, hey, look, eat less fatty food. And you go to the doctor in six months' time, and most people still continue eating the fatty food. And it comes down to the most successful outcomes I've ever worked on were those where, I was brought in to uplift internal capability, where most organizations, very few organizations will say, we have lots of spare capacity. Everyone is like, oh, we're slammed, we're really busy, action-packed, and so on. So that lack of capacity, together with a trusted advisor and partners, help accelerate the delivery of certain outcomes. I've seen it where I've gone in, uplifted a challenging area that's very manual, very tedious, automated it, and then handed it over to a person within the organization. And then, look, they operate it, and then they're focusing on more value-added activities. Even mature organizations like actuaries, I've gone in and they've got their daisy-chained access databases. But then it's migrating those, making it more robust, and then they focus on more of the insights rather than manually massaging and grinding away, massaging the data to do their insights. So it really comes down to you have to have the right mix. And I found that it works best where you bring someone in, builds up capacity for your people, reduces the non-value added activities from using trusted partners, automate things, use AI for the right use cases, and then moving on to the next area and improving that and making it leaner and more effective at the end of the day.
Yeah. Your model around fractional leadership, it's one that I really like and I often read about. And tell us about kind of how your fractional leadership type model works in tandem with these delivery partners in order to help that customer create lasting change.
So we generally get called in to ensure that we are translating the business speak. We're speaking to the boards, engaging the boards and executive team, and translating that into the technical speak at the end of the day, and vice versa. Understanding the nitty-gritty and the technical challenges and opportunities and translating that to the board and executive on this is why you need to do this, because it will uplift revenue, it will reduce risk and compliance issues at the end of the day. So it's getting that proper alignment to the strategy in the board, getting that visibility and program management almost, and managing those risks effectively as the trusted advisor. Essentially ensuring that the right things are being done by the partner and that muscle memory is being built up at the end of the day.
And if we move across to kind of automation and AI, what role does that play in executing on a data strategy?
So as I touched upon previously, it's the use of automation and AI is very much going to be helping organizations accelerate their performance when done correctly and done properly with a trusted advisor. The last thing you want is having a vendor come in and go, look, we'll automate everything. That's not going to work, right? You'd spend all this money. You want a trusted advisor to come in and go, look, we know from experience that the best way to maximize the ROI is to focus on these really tedious use cases. And again, using the analogy is picking just the right use cases and dosages for the right problems to solve the maladies that the organization is facing, rather than overdose it and kill the patient.
Yeah, I love it. Gladwin, I really appreciate your time and insights on that. So just as a summary for the audience, we spoke about the first stage, which is the maturity assessment, the data blood test. Then we spoke about the second stage, which is all around the strategy and the roadmap, which is the organizational diet plan. And then we finished off there with the third and final stage, which is execution, where that's like your data personal trainer. So I think your insights for the audience have been invaluable, and thank you for coming to join us to talk a little bit about that. But just before I let you leave today, we're going to go across into something that we call the ADAverse hot seat. And this is where I fire off rapid questions to you and you get to answer them. So Gladwin, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, perfect, mate. First up, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Fighter pilot. But my parents went no way in hell. And now looking at the current macro climate, maybe that wasn't such a bad idea.
Yeah, with all the craziness happening at the moment, maybe it wasn't such a bad idea. Yeah. All right. Next up, what is something on your bucket list that you have managed to tick off?
Throwing myself out of a perfectly good helicopter and going skydiving.
Like, that sounds interesting. Out of a helicopter, I have skydived myself. I did it out of a plane. It was one of the scariest things that I ever did, but out of a helicopter sounds very interesting. Beautiful. All right, next up, what is something on your bucket list that you are yet to do?
So this is one that, it's so close, but not quite, is get my resto modded 1982 Chevrolet Camaro back on the road. So I've been working on it for 3+ years. And yeah, fingers crossed. Every time we do something, and we fix something else breaks. You fix the front, and then something happens to the back. So yeah, that's fingers crossed. That's my bucket list, is get my Camaro back on the road.
I look forward to seeing some pictures, and it sounds like you're pretty close. So looking forward to that. All right, next up, if you could only recommend one book for the audience to read, what would it be and why?
So this is critical for the data space and for all data people, and I think people are going to be surprised. But I would say it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, which is an oldie but a goldie. And as we've touched upon through the interview, it's about the people. It's not about the data, technology, or AI. It's about the people, and being able to influence people and talk to people is a critical skill for any data person in this day and age. And I highly recommend anyone read that book.
Yeah, it is a brilliant book, and I can second that. And absolutely, it is always about the people. So you need to make sure you bring them along for the journey and help them, educate them, bring them and make them part of the process. All right, last but not least, how do you want to be remembered?
So this is a tricky one, but I will sum it up with a quote that captures it perfectly and sums me up exactly how I want to be remembered. It's by a person called Stephen Grellet, and the quote goes this way: I shall pass this way but once. Any good thing, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness I can show to any fellow creature, let me do it now. Let me not defer or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And to summarize what it comes down to, what drives me is I want to make a lasting difference to Oz Inc. and my community around me.
Yeah, brilliant. What an unbelievable quote that is. I always say, be a good human, and that lines up perfectly with that. So thank you for sharing that. All right, Gladwin, thank you so much for your time today. If you could leave our listeners with one mindset shift or thought or something to take away from today, what would it be?
I would say always keep learning and have a growth mindset, which is part of learning constantly. I think if you have a growth mindset, it doesn't matter what level you're at, whether you're a fresh grad coming out of university looking for your first data job, or you're an executive engaging with the board, having a growth mindset is key.
Couldn't have said it better myself. One of the best things, or one of the well-known things in the future of the world, is about having that growth mindset, adapting to change, and being kind of that generalist that can pick up different things. So absolutely agree with you there. All right, that brings us to the end of today's episode. So Gladwin, thank you very much once again for joining us. We really appreciate your time and your amazing insights. For anyone else, thanks again for joining us on the ADAverse podcast. If this conversation sparked ideas or maybe highlighted areas you need to explore further, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Subscribe to this podcast, share it with a colleague, and join us at adaverse.com.au to keep the conversation going. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll speak to you soon.
Be part of the community by visiting adaverse.com.au. See you in the ADAverse.